Rocky Mountain PBS. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. When we come back, we look at the 9/11 bill that still stands before the Senate. And we'll talk with one of the first responders. He lost his foot as he tried to help people after 9/11 at the pile, as it was called. He then gave his kidney to help another person in need. He now suffers respiratory problems. He's in Washington, D.C., waiting for the vote. Stay with us. War by Hypnotic Brass Ensemble here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. More than 9 years after the September 11th attacks, the Senate may be on the verge of finally voting on legislation that would grant health benefits to 9/11 first responders. The James Zadroga 9/11 Health and Compensation Act would provide billions of dollars in aid and medical coverage to the more than 20,000 9/11 first responders suffering the health consequences of being exposed to toxic substances at Ground Zero. The House passed a $7.4 billion version of the bill in September, but the Senate version has been held up by a Republican filibuster. New York Senators Chuck Schumer and Kristen Gillibrand announced a revised bill last week that reduced the cost to $6.2 billion over 10 years. They hope to have enough votes to bring the measure to a vote in the Senate today. Republican Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma has said he'll likely block the measure again. That's Dr. Coburn. Speaking on Fox News on Tuesday, he said the Senate needs time to consider the bill.
This bill hadn't even been through a committee. We haven't had the debate in our committee on this bill to know if it is the best thing to do. We haven't had the testimony to know whether. This is a bill that's been drawn up and forced through Congress at the end of the year on a basis to solve a problem that we didn't have time to solve and we didn't get done. So what we're going to do is we're going to pass a bill, maybe, doubtful, and then we're going to have to come back and fix it, and we're going to waste a whole bunch more money and not fix the real problem, which is taking care of those people who are so desperately dependent on us.
Senator, I appreciate
their hearts are in a good place, their head's not in a good place. We can do this next year, and we should.
That was Dr. Coburn, that's Senator Coburn from Oklahoma. He claims the bill was never considered by a congressional committee, but the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee did in fact hold a hearing on the bill in June, and Senator Coburn sits on that very committee. On Tuesday, 9/11 first responders headed to Washington, D.C. to call on the Senate to pass the bill. Speaking at a news conference with the Ground Zero workers, New York Senator Chuck Schumer urged his colleagues to vote on the measure.
It is all too easy to say, I'd like to dot the I differently or cross the T differently, and let's start over. But when you have cancer, you can't start over. And so, all these heroes are asking for is an up or down vote before Christmas. Waiting till next year would be a lump of coal, and we will not stand for it. Enough, enough, enough with the delays. These are American heroes. This is a matter of life and death. They didn't wait a minute before rushing to Ground Zero, but their government has been waiting 9 years, and they cannot wait any longer.
If the bill passes in the Senate, it'll have to go back to the House to get approval before the end of the session. House members will reportedly hang around the Capitol at least through the evening today to quickly sign off on any Senate-backed plan. John Feal is with us today, former construction worker. He responded after the 9/11 attacks, racing to Ground Zero to help out. Several days later, he lost his foot working there. He now suffers respiratory problems. He's a leading advocate for 9/11 responders and the president of the FealGood Foundation. He's part of the group of 9/11 first responders in D.C. right now to urge the Senate to pass the Zadroga bill. He's joining us from Washington, D.C. John Feal, what is your response first to Oklahoma Senator Tom Coburn, who himself is a doctor, who is blocking the bill?
Well, Amy, one, thank you for having me. I was amazed by Dr. Coburn's response because before he's a senator, he's a doctor, and I think he goes against his oath as a doctor to seriously consider helping people that have illnesses. And I'm not the smartest man in the world, but as a common sense thinker, it just didn't. I couldn't digest it or wrap my arms around it that a doctor would be so against helping people that are seriously ill. And I just don't think the doctor has his facts straight, because there's been 22 committee hearings in the House, and there's been one in the Senate. This bill's over 9 years old. So they can't hide behind excuses anymore, Amy. You know, they didn't like to pay for it. They didn't like this. They didn't like this. A couple of years ago, the bill was $10.5 billion. Now it's $6.2 billion. How much more can it go before you really can't help anybody anymore? But, Amy, I'm confident that the bill gets done today and passed, and it gets to the House and gets done in the House. And I'm not confident. I'm just, I willed this to the finish line, and I'm going home on the bus today with some amazing people, and we're going to be smiling.
Explain what happened to you, John. 9/11 happened. The terror attacks took place. Where were you when it happened?
Well, Amy, I got there the following night. So I was doing another large construction job upstate New York. So I'm in no way a hero. In fact, I went to therapy for a year not to be called a hero. I wound up losing half of my foot. I spent 11 weeks in the hospital with gangrene after 8,000 pounds of steel crushed my foot on September 17th. But my injury pales in comparison to these illnesses that these men and women suffer. My injury is gruesome and horrific to look at. But these invisible diseases like these cancers and these severe respiratory problems and scardosis, pulmonary fibrosis, and the post-traumatic, which is killing these people left and right, is invisible, and you can't see it. And we have lost 990 people since 9/11 to 9/11-related illnesses. And if that's not enough fact to pass this bill, then I'm dumbfounded by what it actually takes to get something done in D.C.
I want to turn to an interview that I did with a sick 9/11 worker, Joe Picoro. He was an iron worker from New Jersey. He was 34 years old when he went to Ground Zero after 9/11. He died in October from his illnesses. I spoke to Joe by telephone September 11th, 2009. This is some of what he had to say.
You know, like my doctor said, I have the lungs of a 95-year-old man. Now, you know, where she said about age, you know, we're aging, and our bodies are aging way before they're supposed to, you know. And like I said, the doctor gave me a year or so to live, you know, and a year or two to live, and you know, that's you know, we need to get this straight. We need to straighten this out. We need to get the funding. We need to get the James Zadroga bill passed. You know, I mean, I've been saying this for year after year. So is Mrs. Maloney and also Mr. Molina, that it has to be passed, and yet it never seems to make it. It never seems to get passed, and I don't understand why.
That was Joe Picoro. He died this past October. John.
Amy?